Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Inside Boxing Weekly show is brought to you by MyBookie.ag, and I'm sure John Einreinhofer will have us some odds for the fights this weekend coming up. But you can go on the banner on the website, www.thegruelingtruth.net, click on MyBookie.ag. It'll take you right in. You sign up. You go make a lot of money this week. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in my co-host. First of all, our resident bookie, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, great to be here as always.
All right, and next up, of course, we have the great Jeremiah Pricer.
Hey, I like that nickname. We should stick with that.
Jeremiah the Great. All right.
Yeah.
We got some news here, too, Jeremiah. Today, we came to an agreement with Michael Montero. He will start putting his podcast on, or not our podcast, but his YouTube videos will be embedded into our website, thegruelingtruth.net. He is also looking into starting a podcast that will run with us. So then you can hear Michael on iHeartRadio. You can hear him on thegruelingtruth.net. You can go to iTunes and download the app and hear everything Michael does. And Michael will be with us Sunday night at 9 o'clock live Eastern Time to discuss the Lomachenko, or as I like to call him, Jeremiah's man crush, against Guillermo Rigondeaux. So make sure you check us out Sunday night at 9 o'clock live. We're going to start off with, of course, maybe the biggest boxing news of the last quarter century. Manuel Charr has become the first German since Max Schmeling to win the heavyweight championship of the world. And he did it against a man by the name of Alexander Ustinov, who I think everybody thought was completely unbeatable, Jeremiah.
I love that introduction, man.
Hey, I didn't laugh at any point either, because this shit is a joke.
I was laughing.
I mean, it's a joke. Manuel Charr. Come on.
Yeah. I had to mute my mic because it's amateur hour, I guess, at the WBA. But yeah, I mean, and you have a number of websites running this. In fact, I saw Rappler.com. I'm not too familiar with them, but I know they do publish boxing news regularly, especially Filipino stuff. They said Germany has finally broken its 85-year wait for a German heavyweight champion. I also saw a number of German news networks covering it as such. This is it's just absurd. I mean, to compare Manuel Charr's achievement to Max Schmeling's it's ridiculous. I mean, these are guys in Ustinov and Charr who are stepping stones for up-and-comers.
Yeah,
I mean, these are guys...
Charr's last kind of big-name fight was probably what? Breedis, who's like a light heavyweight or cruiserweight, and he lost to him by a 5-round knockout.
Well, not only a 5-round knockout. I mean, I encourage anybody who's listening to the show, go watch that knockout. Breidis is 213 pounds and starches him cold with an uppercut. I mean, he blitzed him. I mean, it wasn't even a contest. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's in the WBSS at cruiserweight. So I'm sitting here scratching my head why this would even be sanctioned as a title fight. And Dan Rafael, to his credit, I know a lot of people aren't keen on him. I don't have much of a problem with him, but he went off on the WBA. He was told by Gilberto Mendoza Jr. that this would not be a title fight, and lo and behold, this is what we get. It is a title fight, and now even more exciting than this being compared to Max Schmeling is that Manuel Charr is being ordered to negotiate with Frezo Kendo. God, I'm excited about that. What about you guys?
Kendo is probably one of the most underrated fighters in boxing history. I mean, if you remember, he took Holyfield like 7 rounds, and Holyfield was only like 57 years old before he knocked him out. Holyfield knocked him out. So,
well, it went the distance, but Holyfield dropped him when Holyfield.
That's what it was, yeah. But Holyfield was like 50 years old at the time. Frezo Kendo's a joke.
I was such a Holyfield fan. I hate to confess to this, but I actually bought that on paper.
All right, so. Hey, wait a second. John,
right there.
John, we argue a lot, but we're not arguing on this because I bought it too.
There you go.
It was Evander Holyfield. He's the real freaking deal. What do you want me to do?
Exactly. We owed him. And it was like $29.99 or something.
Yeah, and it was a better heavyweight fight than most of the crap you see today anyway.
No, it wasn't really a bad fight, and it was on a Friday night, which was a little unusual.
Did you pay for him and Lou Savarese?
Let's see. I was at Foreman Savarese live.
No, I mean, did you pay for Holyfield Savarese?
Boy, you got. I'm sure I even saw it. You got to refresh my recollection on what happened in Holyfield.
Actually, it was a really good fight, and Holyfield beat him. That's what I remember. But I do know I paid for it.
And I think I saw the fight. I think I did see the fight. But I can't quite remember as well as some of the others.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to forget a legend like Lou Savarese.
He wasn't a bad fighter.
No, he'd be a top 10 guy. Well, he'd be the WBA regular champion today.
Yeah.
He would. No, he literally would be. So.
Oh, he beat the shit out of Manuel Char or whatever the hell people call him.
Well, I mean, that's the truth. He would. I mean, so let's keep perspective there. Yeah, Lou Savarese would take out Char.
Well, guys. So if we got to put this into perspective, though, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. If Frezzo Kendo does get this fight, in fact, and he's not paid off, any step-aside money, he might have been living off it for the last few years. I don't know. And if he is, I can't blame him. But if Frezzo Kendo wins, imagine if he does, then we can compare that to what George Foreman did, because Frezzo Kendo would be 44, 45 years old.
Well, I think that beating Manuel Char is up there with some of the greatest accomplishments ever.
Yeah, George Foreman, Michael Moore.
Yeah, it's right there. Because when I think of Michael Moore, I also automatically think of Manuel Char.
The point is, all alphabets must be ignored, and a lot of, again, I'm not picking on, but it's just the truth, and we've explained our theories why, and we kind of agree on that. Yeah, the Brits and the Europeans are part of what's keeping them going. They are more disregarded in the United States than they are overseas. There's certainly people in the United States that pay more attention to them, too. Showtime's a horrible offender. But, overseas, they prop them up more. And they, again, like this Char thing, and it's got to stop. It's not that they don't do it in the U.S., but it's even worse overseas. Here, you get some people that still, come up from the old tradition of just laughing at them and realizing what they were. But I saw an intelligent Australian boxing fan, on social media about 2 weeks ago was trying to argue with me about he had to explain to me how the WBO worked, that I wasn't getting it. I get how the WBO works. What HBO and Bob Arum tell them to do, that's a title fight. I don't care. I don't need to know what the WBO's rules are because the WBO's rules mean nothing.
Yeah, and right now we're going to stop talking about this entire bullshit fight because there's no reason to give it any more airtime. I just wanted to make fun of it for a while, so there we are.
Felt good.
Yeah, it did. It got a load off of me, and I feel much better. I feel re-energized. So now we're ready to talk about the fights from Madison Square Garden Theater this past Saturday night. We had Sullivan Barrera, who had a tougher time with Felix Valera than people thought they would, John.
Yeah, Valera, got to give credit where credit's due. He did go the distance with Bivol, and we saw why, because he turned out he is a better fighter than I expected and a lot of people expected, and the odds reflected. Because, again, it's Dominicans. You don't know what you're getting. Just because there's not that many fighters for them to fight when they're fighting their early fights in the DR, and they fight guys with horrible records, and that's what Valera did. Then he went the distance with Bivol, and then, it turns out against Barrera, even though he clearly lost the fight, he scored a clean knockdown early, and he was a competent fighter who had some heart. Looking ahead, after seeing that whole fight, of course, Sullivan Barrera is the top guy, and he's worthy of being that, but how about Valera against somebody like Joe Smith when he comes back, because Joe Smith seems to have developed some relationship with HBO. They just had Valera on there, to fight on the East Coast.
That'd be an exciting fight, John. That'd be an exciting fight.
Let me give HBO a suggestion there. That's not too much for Joe Smith to come back against, although it would be somebody to threaten to beat him and be a good fight. So I'll give HBO a suggestion there for when Joe Smith
and I think that's a guy that Valera's style would make for a Joe Smith win, possibly.
Yeah, a fight that Joe Smith can win, but a good fight, and a good fight for HBO. Wouldn't be garbage. Would be a good, entertaining fight. Not too much for Joe Smith to come back with, but a guy that's got a chance to beat him. So I'd like to see that fight.
All right. Jeremiah, my question is with Sullivan Barrera. I mean, I know John thinks he's like top 3 in the light heavyweights. I think he's more somewhere between 6 and 10. What's your take on him coming off this performance?
Well, I think what it shows is that his chin is a weak spot for him, and his heart looks good. I mean, the times I've seen him dropped against Shabransky and now against Valera, he gets up quickly, he recovers quickly. I mean, when he was dropped in this fight, he came right back. He didn't rest. He didn't try to use his lateral movement, and he didn't really play it safe for a long time, and that's good. That's the kind of guy you like to see up there in the top 10 in a division, because it's a guy who's going to give you a fight. But I do see it as a concern. I mean, and I see it as a concern for a lot of these guys, to be frank. It's if you're fighting at 175 and taking a clean punch is not your strong point, it's going to be tough for you. But I think he's a good boxer puncher. I mean, I can't really fault him for his performance too much. I mean, Valera was awkward. You can see that the man can hit. I mean, when he let his hands go, he was actually quite good. And like John said, I can see why he lasted with Bivol, but it's going to be a tough road for him. I mean, what I see is that Sullivan Barrera is I would say that he's about a top 5 guy now. With his resume and whatnot, I certainly appreciate it more than I appreciate Peter Biev's or some other guys in the bottom part of the top 10. But he's going to have a tough one there. And after watching Sergey Kovalev, and we'll get to that here in a minute, Barrera to me just looks a notch below the very best guys. But at 35 years old, he's really got to step on the gas. From what I understand, he's Bivol's mandatory. So, we might get that fight, and I'd appreciate it. If he gets Kovalev, that's fine too. But I think he's a damn good boxer puncher. But again, I think the chin, I think the skills, I don't think he's quite ready for the best of the best.
All right, the next fight on the evening, did you want to say something, John?
Yeah, I wanted to, just add to what Jeremiah said, because I didn't discuss Barrera as much. I was surprised by Valera, so I wanted to give him some props and think about that possible Smith fight. But Barrera, I think to me, he had probably reached the number 1 spot because, if you're giving it to Stevenson, and you don't recognize him as lineal champ anymore, which I don't at this point, but I know Transnational does, and I respect what they do. But let's just throw him out of it for a moment. I would have had Barrera 1 and Kovalev 2. And I've learned when you try to do your best with predicting things and what's going to happen, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit, what you want to try to do is not be too rigid and go on what you see. And what I would do after what I saw Saturday night is, at one time I had Kovalev ahead of Barrera. Then I would have just very recently flipped it and put Barrera 1 and Kovalev 2. After what I saw Saturday night, like Jeremiah talked about with Barrera's chin, that's the one point there that you've got to look at as a weakness. He's just going down too much at this point. I would then flip them back with the way Kovalev looked. Now I would put Kovalev 1 and Barrera 2. And I just want to add on that note that Keith Idek, who writes for Boxing Scene and the Record of New Jersey, New Jersey, Main Events is based in New Jersey, so you want to pay attention to that. They're talking March 2nd, that since Kovalev's with Main Events, Barrera's with Main Events, and they both are tied to HBO, that HBO is looking at putting those two together on March 2nd. And for me, there would be an argument there at this point that that's 1 against 2. So I think that would be a huge fight to be on regular HBO.
All right, next up, we got Yuriorkis Gamboa. I'm going to put quotation marks around this. 1, a majority decision against Jason Sosa. The judges scored it 94-94, 95-93, and Adelaide Bird must have been there because she scored this 96-92. I had Sosa winning. If you count who won how many rounds, it's close. But those 2 points away there, Jeremiah, had to make this fight for Sosa.
Yeah, I think most people agree with you. I mean, being a member of Transnational and every Sunday through Tuesday, there's a discussion about what people thought of the performance, and And the consensus was, and I know John's a little concerned with this, is that they didn't feel as if it was a robbery. They felt as if there was enough close rounds where you could maybe flip some here and there. And to be honest with you, when I was watching the fight, I was watching the British feed, and I would flip to the American feed, and they seemed a bit more. They seemed a bit more warm to Jason Sosa than the British feed was, so I thought I got a pretty good perspective there. But for my part, I actually had Gamboa winning a lot of the early rounds. I thought he was landing the harder, clear punches. And Sosa, it looked like he was working hard, but he wasn't really landing a lot of good stuff. Here and there, it looked like he was connecting. But yeah, it looked like one of those things. In my opinion, I would agree with both of you. I'm sure you both had Sosa winning. I thought Sosa edged it. It's not the most horrendous decision I've ever seen, but but we also got to take into account that Yorkios Gamboa only had 3 weeks to prepare for this fight, and you give him another 4, he probably wins it more clearly than this. So I don't want to come down too hard on Gamboa, but it is a fact that he's just not the same fighter that he used to be. He still looks quick. He can still hit a little bit, but you can see that it's just not the same guy. That dynamo we used to see at 126, when he was beating Salido and all sorts of other guys. He's just not the same guy. And at this point, I think he's a fringe player, and I think that he's going to be upset, by another Robinson Castaneda host in no time.
All right, John, the way I looked at it was this. I actually had Sosa winning by a point, so I see what Jeremiah says. But when you take those 2 points, I don't see how you can get anything but Sosa. I had Gamboa winning 4 of the first 5 rounds, and then Sosa basically controlling it from there.
That's the way I had it, Mike, and that's my point. That I was just on social media pointing out to Jeremiah earlier. I like following what Transnational does because we need them to do what they do, and I totally support that and respect that, and it's just constructive criticism when I say things that want to make it as good as possible. And I think it would have to be a robbery because I saw it the way you both did. But, Gamboa taking the early rounds, I thought Gamboa fought much, much better than I expected him to. I'm willing to give him props there. I have no problem saying that. But, Jason Sosa swept the second half of the fight, basically, and then he got a point because Gamboa kept holding, and Gamboa did keep holding. It was ridiculous. I mean, we can't take away the fact that, Gamboa was just hanging on, in the late rounds, but with all the excessive holding. He lost a point like he should have. And then Sosa clearly dropped him. It was a clean knockdown. So that was clearly another point. He gets a 10-8 round, the way anybody's going to score it. With the 2 points, to me, those extra 2 points for Sosa, it's got to be, there's just no way to score it for Gamboa. So then it becomes a robbery to me because you can't ignore the fact that there was 2 10-8 rounds there, and then you just can't get it for Gamboa. That to me then is a robbery. When there's no way you can get it for the other guy, and I hate to see a hard working guy like Jason Sosa get penalized when he clearly won the fight and drop out of Transnational's rankings. And I don't think HBO will penalize him because I thought Lampley had one of the better nights I've seen him have for a few years. Maybe his new contract got him more relaxed or something, but I thought he did a good job, and I thought Lampley pointed that out a lot during the fight, and I thought he was correct. I mean, Sosa's always given us good fights. He works. He's a workmanlike fighter. I know he was working a pizza place in Camden, New Jersey, so he's definitely coming from the tough Scrabble background, and we know that's the hometown of the Camden buzzsaw, Dwight Muhammad Cowie. So definitely a tough town that Sosa's from there. His trainer's from Camden as well. And, a good story, and he's always given us good fights, like you pointed out last week, Mike. Against Lomachenko, he was doing all he could, trying as hard as he could, and he just couldn't hit him. I mean, that was a credit to Lomachenko.
Yeah, but most guys in that situation would just shut it down and try to go to distance.
Right. I mean, most guys would have quit. Like Sosa, his corner stopped it, but he didn't quit. He kept trying. He wasn't landing, but he kept trying, and he was taking shots. And that's what you like about the guy. I mean, he's always in there trying as hard as he can. And these are guys on the level of boxing. Even though he's world class, they're not making that much money. And it's for him to lose that, you would hate to see anything negative happen from here to him here on out, but I have a feeling it won't, thankfully, and that's probably what might come out as good, is that I don't picture HBO won't bring Jason Sosa back. He gives them a good effort and a good fight, and people seem to like watching him fight. Of course, Kovalev was the headliner, but there was 900,000 HBO viewers. That's their second best of the year after Crawford Diaz. So, I think part of it is the card in its totality. So, people like to watch Sosa. There's evidence of that. Bring him back, and Gamboa did enough for me. I'm going to be fair to Gamboa, and even I want to, he did. I hate to see him get hurt at 35, still continuing in a lower weight class, but he showed enough that if he wants to come back, he deserves to be brought back. It's just that Sosa won the fight.
All right.
Yeah, and
good.
Yeah, I would just say real quick, the good thing about Sosa is there's a lot of good matchups in his division for him. I mean, there are a lot of bangers, or not bangers, but aggressors in that class, and I think he can make a bunch of good fights. But I will say in one sense real quick that it was a robbery because the person who had that wide scorecard, don't even know their name, don't even really care. That's a robbery. It's you're robbing a guy of a fair fight, and we can't have that in boxing.
Yeah, the way Canelo's camp robbed Triple G with that draw. All right, real quick, we're going to go to Sergey
Can't go with that, but this was a robbery, though. Okay, let's go to
So
Kovalev.
was that. So Adelaide Bird scoring the fight like 10-2 wasn't a robbery?
But the draw was a bad scorecard, but the draw wasn't a robbery.
The draw was a robbery. And 99% of all people except for John in West Virginia believe that.
And Roberto Duran.
Roberto Duran can't even speak English. His translator
You can
can say
insult me,
he said
but don't
anything.
don't insult Roberto Duran.
I'll insult him. He doesn't know where I live. He doesn't know my address.
He hasn't
Well,
come on the podcast.
Like Ray
Yeah.
Arcel said, you still don't want to see him in a dark alley saying, "Good pastor, what are you doing?" Saying that Canelo didn't earn a draw or a win in that fight.
You know what? I won't even recognize him if he says my name and talks like that because he doesn't speak English, supposedly.
That's part of the mystique. He really can speak English.
I know. But this is the thing. If anybody's out there that can speak Spanish, would like to host a Spanish-speaking show, let us know, and maybe we could have Roberto Duran on, and I'm dead serious about that. Hit us up at Grueling Truth on Twitter. Let us know you speak Spanish well. We'll have a Spanish boxing show. Next up, we have the shame of John Einreinhofer, who picked Shabransky to beat Kovalev. It didn't quite work out that way, John.
No, I'll take it on because I think, except for the final result, which I'll be the first to say is the most important thing, I didn't have it analyzed wrong, except what I did have analyzed wrong, obviously, was that I thought somehow when Shabransky started getting caught with that right hand, which he's vulnerable to because of his style, that he might find a way to get through it, and that Kovalev might be showing some signs he wasn't going to be as committed in a tough fight and hadn't taken hard shots. He did get moved by Shabransky a couple times in the brief 2 rounds Shabransky was in there, but Kovalev looked very sharp, and Shabransky didn't overcome his style the difficulties of the style matchup. But let me add something else that I would have expected to see when I was making my pick, and this is very difficult to do in boxing history. There hasn't been a lot of success with it, but usually a trainer will try in this type of a situation. When you are going into a style matchup that is terrible for you, and that's why they picked you for that fight, you would think that Shabransky would come in, at least in the first 2 rounds, with some type of an attempted style adjustment that his corner would have him make, understanding what they were getting themselves into. And all you heard Robles say in his corner was the style adjustment, which I did hear. There was only 1 round in between rounds, but I was listening carefully for it, waiting to hear this. The style adjustment was, we want to double that left jab. Now, I've been watching boxing a long time, and I'm not training any top 10 guys or close to top 10 guys. But with that understood, when you are being brought into a style matchup because you are vulnerable for taking right hands, the last thing you want to do is have your left hand extended for long periods of time when you're not very quick. And I thought that was absolutely bizarre, that the style adjustment going into this fight was double your left jab. That was frightening to me, and we saw how it all ended in the second round. So whatever attempted style adjustment for Shabransky there was going in, there wasn't. I thought Max Kellerman and sometimes Max makes a good point, sometimes he makes not a good point, so you got to call these guys out on a bad point because Roy Jones did. Max Kellerman, bizarrely, during the brief 2 rounds, said to make that wasn't there, that Shabransky was moving forward on Kovalev because he must have been emboldened by Kovalev's performance against Ward, and Roy Jones correctly said back to Max, this is all the guy knows how to do. He doesn't have any other style adjustment. He just comes forward with himself being open. That's what he is, which is the truth. There was no adjustment, so that's one of the reasons it didn't work out. I tried to outguess the odds makers, which you can't do usually without inside information because I know boxing, but the people who know boxing who think Shabransky might have a chance is built into that 8-1 odds, and that's why the odds makers know what they're doing. So this was not the night of the upset.
All right, Jeremiah, is Kovalev the best light heavyweight in the world now?
Yeah, I think he's the best. I mean, I think he is the best. I mean, he looked real sharp. I mean, this is my thing is I understood John's logic. I mean, Shabransky, he's getting all sorts of flack now, and don't get me wrong, he is a come-forward guy. His defense isn't that good, but this still is a guy who had a good fight with Gonzalez. He knocked Sullivan Barrera down. He's not a bum. I mean, people are writing him off as if he's just not skilled. I understand there was styles matchup there and it played in Kovalev's favor, but he is one of those guys that if you don't bring it that night, he can't upset you. He's got a good motor. He comes forward, he can punch a bit. Yeah, but Kovalev looked really sharp. I was impressed. I mean, a lot of people had questions going in. What was his mental state? How was his training? Because after all, I think he started the camp without a trainer. But he looks sharp. I mean, his jab is fantastic. And everybody should have known that anyways. I mean, he was tit for tat with Andre Ward in terms of the jab. I mean, and Andre Ward is a fantastic jab. Kovalev's jab was quick. It was accurate. He went up and down. And these are things that he's been doing to other guys for years. And like I said, Kovalev is one of the best punchers in the sport. He proved that. I mean, it's not as if, Shabransky has an iron chin, but it took, 7 rounds for Sullivan Barrera to get the job done, and Kovalev was in and out in a flash. I like what I see from Kovalev. The only thing that I'm going to knock him on is I wish he would throw more than the 1-2. He's got to vary his attack up a little bit more. This is the kind of thing that I wanted him to do against Andre Ward in the rematch. He's got to throw in more hooks, because his 1-2 is fantastic. I mean, he's one of the best jabbers in the sport. Again, one of the best hitters in the sport. He goes to the body really well. And in fact, I think his body work is underrated. We talked about this before, but when he fought Cedric Agnew, with a jab, he was able to break his ribs. I mean, and it's not the only time that he's been able to hurt guys to the body. I would just like to see him follow up that 1-2 with a left hook to the liver, mix in a few other things. He doesn't really toss an uppercut. That would be a nice addition against guys who like to bore forward. But yeah, I like what I saw. He's best at 175 in my opinion.
All right. So
I just want to add very, very sharp performance by Kovalev since I didn't talk about him, but no criticisms for me of Kovalev's performance. Did what he had to do. Very, very sharp. Did prove to me that he's number one right now in the light heavyweight rankings. He's reestablished that spot for me. And as Jeremiah pointed out, I think even though it looks like he's going to have trouble with his defensive vulnerabilities, what you have to be fair with Shabransky at this point. Now, maybe he took too much of a beating against these two guys, but you can make the argument his 2 losses are to the best 2 light heavyweights in the world. So let's not get too down on the guy right now.
All right. We are going to take a break. The show won't be as long tonight as normal because Jeremiah's got to go play volleyball. You ever hear anything that gay, John?
No comment.
The only way
Whatever,
go ahead.
I can take it, man. Hit me. I don't care. Hey, yeah. My wife just had her second child. She needs a way of staying active. So, just play some co-ed volleyball, whatever.
You're the only one that laughed. All right, we'll be back after this word from mybookie.ag.
Hey, Puckheads, this is Patrick.
And Jason.
From the Puck Guys podcast at the Grueling Truth Network, and we're here with one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money.
The Grueling Truth has partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag.
In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and MyBookie.ag will give you a 50% bonus on your first deposit of up to $3,000 in extra cash. Just enter the promo code TGT50. That's TGT50 to take advantage of this offer. Where do they got to go, Jay?
That is a smart-looking question, Pat. They need to go to visitmybookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth Network, and enjoy your winning today.
MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Inside Boxing Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Of course, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Remember, go on, click the banner on the website, gruelingtruth.net. It'll take you right there. And that brings us to this week's fight. I'll start out with John so he can tell us the odds. We've got Miguel Cotto in his, once again, quotation marks around this, farewell fight against Saddam Ali at Madison Square Garden. Saddam Ali is the current, unless they've stripped him so they could give it to somebody else, WBA International welterweight title holder. I got to read that because that's the first time I've seen that one. And he beat Johan Perez. He fought Jesse Vargas, who gave him his only loss by a TKO. But he's fought some other guys that are decent. He's a decent fighter, John. What are the odds on this?
This is a good one to look at because MyBookie.ag has rounds on this one as well as the straight odds on who's going to win. And it's not looking good for Saddam Ali, as he's a plus 675. Cotto's a minus 950. The over 9.5 rounds is minus 120. So that means we're looking at probably a likelihood that the experts think that Ali's going to be able to go the distance here. It's a plus 100 for the under 9.5. And so with Cotto being such a big favorite, that would basically be they don't think Cotto's going to stop him now. Saddam Ali got stopped by Jesse Vargas, and Miguel Cotto's a much better puncher than Jesse Vargas, but still, the odds makers don't think that the stoppage is going to likely to happen here.
Yeah, but look at it like this, John. John, real quick, though. You know, if a couple months ago I had told you Saddam Ali would beat Miguel Cotto, that would not be as surprising to you as Manuel Charr being a heavyweight champion. So anything can happen.
Well, anybody can be called a heavyweight champion now.
Everybody is.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Oprah in here. You get a belt. You get a belt. Everybody gets a belt.
Everybody except Shannon Briggs.
Well, let's face it. This is HBO and Golden Boy with the WBO making. Miguel Cotto's been a great fighter, but he's not a legitimate champion. I mean, he fought Kamagai for the WBO 154-pound vacant belt. I mean that's a joke. You know, we all know that's a joke, not because Miguel Cotto's not a great fighter, but that's just a joke. So, you know, for this to be called some kind of title fight, there's two problems here. It shouldn't be sold as a title fight, and it shouldn't be sold as Cotto's last fight. And I would still say there's no real evidence. I don't think there's ever been any evidence with fans. There really hasn't, that you need this. In other words, if it was Saddam Ali, Miguel Cotto, everybody who follows boxing, which is the only people that watch fights on HBO anyway, let's face it, that's what boxing's down to. I mean, they know who Miguel Cotto is. They're going to watch if they want to watch Miguel Cotto. They don't need it to be for the WBO 154-pound title. They don't need it to be for Miguel Cotto's last fight. They're just going to watch it. So don't tell us this stuff because it just reduces credibility of boxing further. So I just hate when they do this because they don't even need to do it. So I would think Cotto's not going to have any real problems here. I think Ali did prove he's a pretty good fighter, but he has moments where he just doesn't punch. And the getting knocked out by Jesse Vargas, who has not been a puncher throughout his career, just shows that the chin's not that solid. So you add those two factors. And Miguel Cotto is an active fighter. He throws punches, even at his age, which is to his credit. So, and he did show, even fighting as a middleweight, that he's got a good popping his left hook even for the higher weights. So, Cotto should be able to take this thing.
All right, so I'm assuming you're picking Cotto. Jeremiah, definitely. Do you want to do something crazy like John did last week and pick Ali?
No. Maybe another day. I'll wait until there's a fighter that I like, and maybe then I'll do that. Saddam Ali is he's not a bad fighter. I mean, he's got good skills. I mean, he had a good amateur background. He's a good boxer. He was right there with Jesse Vargas in terms of boxing, but he just doesn't have the chin, and he's been fighting at 147 his entire career, at least from what I understand. I don't know if he maybe started off at 140, but yeah, I just I see what everybody else does. I mean, Saddam Ali is a serviceable guy. He'll make it semi-competitive, but he's just not on Cotto's level. I mean, I don't think anybody really expects it, but Saddam Ali could turn it into a bit more of a snooze fest if he wants to, and stick and move and see what he can get out of that. Eventually Cotto will find him and hurt him, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this go 12 rounds at all. But it's just it's not that intriguing of a fight. But I can't blame Cotto. I don't want to be too hard on Cotto in the sense that a lot of people are they're asking themselves, well, why Saddam Ali? In my opinion, why not? I mean, Miguel Cotto's put in his time. He's earned it. You look at Manny Pacquiao fighting a guy like Jeff Horn and I don't want to excuse Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. That's a different animal altogether. But yeah, Saddam Ali, it's fine. I mean, Cotto's already put in his work. He's proven to the game what he has to, and good for him. I'm going to watch the fight. Am I excited about it? Not really, but if it does happen to be Cotto's farewell fight, then I think we all acknowledge he's been one of the better fighters of this generation. I'm not quite sure I would classify him as a top 10 guy, but he's certainly been one of the best. But I look forward to it.
All right, so I assume you're picking Cotto also?
Yeah, I actually think Cotto. I think Cotto will stop him. Saddam Ali's had some chin issues before Jesse Vargas. I mean, Jesse Vargas isn't even a big puncher, but yeah, he's had some scary moments. Who did he fight? He fought an Argentine, and he was hurt in that fight as well. It's just one of those things. The guy just doesn't have a good chin, and I do think Cotto will find him and probably put him out late.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up because of Jeremiah's volleyball. But, John, did you have any closing remarks or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, just briefly, because it's on the MyBookie AG site, and these guys, to me, are legit, fringe of the top 10, if not top 10 guys. Just going to mention these fights. Michel Soros fighting this weekend. He's a minus 5,000 favorite against somebody named Ivan Montero. Soro fights at 154 to 160 in there. And Jeremiah maybe can add some insight on this, because I try to follow everybody, but honestly, I'm not familiar with this guy, and he's popped up at number 10 in the transnational light heavyweight rankings, and light heavyweight's arguably the toughest division in boxing. Igor Mihalkinin is a minus 505 favorite against Dudu Ngumbu, who did go the distance with Fonfara, but Fonfara is not looking as good as we thought he was. So,
I think Dudu wins that fight just because I wanted to say Dudu. Go ahead.
But I thought that's what's worth mentioning, because guy, is in the transnational top 10 or the ring top 10, and he's fighting, probably should take note of that. So maybe Jeremiah can add a little insight to that one.
All right, Jeremiah, any final comments? You want to add some insight to that or talk about something else?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not as familiar with him as others. Actually, he was suggested by one of our Russian board members, and
there we go.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay, I got it now.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, part of the reason it was. Part of the reason I think it was agreed upon is because of his recent win over Machunu. I believe that was his win. And Machuno's nothing special. But I'd have to go on the board and take a look. That was Tuesday morning, and I was at work, so I was just trying to get my votes in real quickly, and I didn't take a long look at the discussion itself. So I'm not exactly sure. But I did want to add a bit about Miguel Cotto. And I am interested in your guys' opinions. If you want to make it quick, that's fine. But I want to ask you guys how much of Miguel Cotto's career, in terms of where he ranks in this era, and in terms of where he ranks in for Puerto Ricans all time, where would you rate him? And one thing I want to add before I get an answer is Miguel Cotto's career is interesting in the sense that he's considered a 4-division quote-unquote champion, right? He gets a lot of credit for that. He's the first Puerto Rican to do so, yada, yada, yada. We also know that, a lot of Puerto Ricans didn't have as many trinkets when they were around. I mean, guys like Carlos Ortiz, who I rate as the best Puerto Rican ever, he didn't have all these alphabet soup organizations to, throw some strap around his waist. But the thing I find interesting about Cotto is his career is partly the product of good management. So when you look at his career, he's won 6 major titles, right? 4 of those were vacancies. So at 140, he beats Kelson Pinto. I mean, did anybody really think Kelson Pinto was, worthy of a title shot? I think his best win was Emmanuel Augustus at the time. But then he beats Carlos Quintana at 147 for a vacant strap. He ends up losing that, and then he fights Michael Jennings, the British Michael Jennings, for a vacant strap. And then he fights Yuri Foreman at 154 for a strap, which he held. And then he beats Sergio Martinez, which, Martinez was not his prime. And then we got Kamagai, which was also a vacancy at 154. So even though we acknowledge that Cotto did really well against Pacquiao and Mayweather, I also want to say that there is a lot of fluff to it, and I also think that he is partly the product of the modern sport itself, wherein so many fighters can get belts a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think that to be up with a Carlos Ortiz, I mean, you got to do more than give somebody a fight. It just seems to me like his biggest fights, he didn't come through, John.
I probably like Cotto maybe a hair more than you guys there. For me, he'd be in the top 10 Puerto Ricans of all time. I have Carlos Ortiz number 1. Cotto's not number 1. And I would already know, and as Jeremiah and I have talked, and I don't like to put exact numbers because it's hard to do lists and you really have to research it to get it right. So I'm not doing that off the top of my head, and I'm not researching it right now. With that said, for me, just having seen both their careers, wherever he comes in, he's going to come in behind Trinidad, and Trinidad's a more recent vintage. So I would say that for me, he's going to be somewhere behind Felix Trinidad, wherever I end up putting him, but he's going to be in the top 10. In terms of, this is where to me linear titles do matter when you have some guys you really like whose career, and when you look at 8 divisions whose careers are good, and then maybe you want to separate them from the greatness. I think that's where you have to go to the 8 division type analysis or linear analysis that kind of Jeremiah's not quite saying but touching on to me, because I don't like all these belts and all these divisions. And Cotto's a guy that's still going to be very, very good if you had 8 divisions. But that's where he probably is a guy who's like a top of the welterweight division contender who maybe never picks up a welterweight title. But he did beat Sergio Martinez, who was the lineal middleweight champion. And, I don't like the catchweight stuff. I argue that more than the Martinez was shot thing, because we're kind of saying that a little bit in hindsight, even though Martinez didn't fight again. I mean, Cotto stopped the guy and just beat the guy up the whole way. I think Cotto deserves a little more credit for that victory than Martinez's excuses, because Martinez got hurt bad with a left hook right early in the fight. I don't think he was the same, and that happens in a fight. So I think you for a guy who, let's say, I like to go to the 8 division analysis and evaluate a guy as if he fought in the old days. So I think then you can do it with everybody when you think about it hard enough and you break it down. So to me, Miguel Cotto would have been a guy who would have been probably like a number 1 welterweight contender. He's got that great win over Shane Mosley when Mosley had something left, and it was a hell of a fight. That was really, really a good fight, and then Cotto clearly won that fight. I think you got to credit him there because, Mosley's a tough guy. And,
all right,
we're still
John,
very
how about this? Where would you compare him to when you throw in Edwin Rosario?
And that's a good question, right?
Because he would be in my top 10, and he would be next to Rosario. I haven't made up my mind who's above and who's below yet, but he would be there for me.
I think those two guys I think that's a fair comparison. I think those two guys are very comparable.
Yeah, because if you look at it, Rosario's biggest fights, he came up short also, even though I think he beat Hector Camacho in 86.
I thought Camacho edged it, but that was a good effort.
Yeah, but you're always wrong because you thought Canelo beat Triple G. You're still the only person that thought that. So go ahead.
But they'd be very similar. But I think they'd be very similar. But I would say with Rosario, I'd have to look one more time at all the guys they fought. Very, very close. You could argue those two either way. With Cotto, with that linear middleweight title win, I think that would probably give him just a slight edge for me over Edwin Rosario.
Yeah, I think, like I said, to me, they're pretty much even. I don't know which one I would put above the other one.
Yeah, very close. Similar.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but it is interesting how putting it in an 8-division context changes the perspective so much, right? So Cotto would really be Cotto would be a top, in my opinion, to be a top 5 welterweight in years past, because with Mayweather and Pacquiao down there, he's not really going to be the top guy there. I mean, obviously he couldn't beat either one of those fellas. But yeah, it would be interesting that you apply that context, and he's a top 5 guy at least at welterweight, and then he would become the lineal middleweight champion. Though, of course, we know a lot of guys who won the lineal championship, and when you look at Cotto's reign, I mean, there wasn't much of one. I mean, he ends up starching, Gil. Gil, who Golovkin beat the crap out of. So it is interesting, right? I mean, you have the modern context where people are like, oh, he's the first 4-division champion ever.
Right.
From Puerto Rico, that's got to make him top 5 or top 3 or whatever it is. And again, I wouldn't, I'm not staunchly against Cotto being in the top 5. I'm not, I'm not saying an argument can't be made there. I just find it interesting how, the perspective changes, right? Essentially, he's a contender at 147, and then he's a champion for a short while at 160. But he was a fantastic fighter, and he gave his all. But I do remember, if I'm not mistaken, John, I thought the Mosley fight was really close, and I thought I knew a number of people who scored it in Mosley's favor.
I thought it was really close, and I was, I like both fighters, but I remember pulling for Mosley a bit in that fight, and that's why I did think Cotto. I was kind of pulling for Mosley, and I still thought Cotto, won the fight. I mean, I just thought it was a very, very good fight, a very tough, close, but I didn't really feel there was a case for Mosley winning.
And is that
wasn't close to it.
Is that his defining win?
Yes, I think that is his defining actual win outside of the Martinez. I think it's, for me, with Cotto, it's Mosley and Martinez, and I like. I like your discussion of the 8-division analysis. Why I still love it, even if some younger fans might think, oh, you're just harkening back to something that doesn't exist anymore. But if you're a boxing historian type, and boxing's history is a big part of the sport, just like baseball, you have to do it to me because it's fair. It gives you, it's the one analysis that still even today, when you do break it down that way, it enables you, like here's a guy, maybe you could then start comparing. Does Cotto, maybe he compares to a Rocky Graziano, is maybe that, something similar. But then you can do it that way, and you can look at it instead of saying, as you point out at the beginning, Jeremiah, I totally agree with, well, Cotto was a 20-division, a 20-belt champion, and Rocky Graziano had won, It's absurd. So, it gives you a chance to make a real comparison.
All right, guys. We got anything else? I just wanted to bring up Edwin Rosario. I really liked him.
Yeah, no, I liked his mutant crab style. He was fun to watch. A real talented guy. But no, real quick, I want to add in, and I know John will be happy about this, but Demetrius Andrade turned down a fight with Sergey Deverenchenko, and his manager said that Deverenchenko was just not good enough. And then Andrade later says that now Canelo Alvarez cannot run from him at 160. This guy is ruining his career.
Yeah, he's lucky HBO picked him up. But I did hear that they, HBO was trying to work out something with Derevyanchenko and Andrade. So, I hadn't heard what happened with it, but with Andrade's history, that would be a surprise. Where Andrade is ruining his career and pushing it too far is the only fight he's looked good recently is the Willie Nelson fight. He looked terrible against Call K, and he looked terrible against that guy he fought the last time. And, HBO's got him signed to a deal. HBO obviously wants some fights for him, but, he's got to take advantage of it. And that does tie in, though. I like, final thought for me that fits with Andre, though, is even though he's maybe the most questionable piece with what fights he's going to take and how he's looked, I like the guys that HBO's bringing in here in the last part of the year and the cards and the fights they're trying to set up. I get a better feel than what they had been doing in the past with the fights that were on regular HBO, and then they were sticking some on pay-per-view. I see some signs of life in the last part of the year, and as Mike and I had discussed off air, and I know, the three of us have talked to Jeremiah about it. All three of us agree that, unlike a lot of people, that PBC put pressure on entities like HBO to do some different things. So, what Heyman and PBC did was good for boxing. However, it's going to turn out by putting pressure on the competition.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap the show up for now. Remember, we'll be back Sunday night live at 9 o'clock. Lomachenko Rigondeaux preview with Michael Montero, who will now be with thegruelingtruth.net. Also tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, we'll have live former two-time world champion. I think it was super lightweight and lightweight, wasn't it? It was super featherweight, super lightweight. I don't know. Either way, since there's a super in there, John's against
Lopez was
a
130. 130. Lopez was 130.
Yeah, super lightweight. I think he won a portion of the lightweight too. Yeah, he did. But we know how alphabets are. But Tony the Tiger Lopez will be on to discuss his career. If you like the Legends of Boxing, you can hear that tonight at 10 Eastern on thegruelingtruth.net or on Spreaker.com. Also, if you go this past week, if you go onto the website, you can find my interview with former middleweight contender Alex Ramos. And also, up shortly, will be an interview I did with Chuck Wepner. And we also had me and Jeremiah had Bones Adams on. So those are all interesting discussions. Make sure you check them out. Right now I'm getting tongue-tied, so I'm going to wrap the show up because I'm obviously talking too much. So remember, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Pricer, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.